Tenemos aquí a Mateu. Mateu nos va a hablar sobre el futuro de REST en Drupal 8. Y Mateu vive en Mallorca y trabaja para Lulabot, es Senior Developer. Morning, everybody. So we're going to start with the second session today. We have here with us Mateu. Mateu works at Lulabot as a Senior Developer, and he lives in Mallorca. So let's give him a welcome.
So before we start, I want to try something different today, and I found this service. It's called Glisser, and it allows you to interact with the presentation. So basically, I don't know if you had the feeling when you're seeing a presentation that, oh, I suddenly got whatever it was in the last slide. I wish he could go back. So with this, you can scroll back to the slides that I already presented. You can take notes on the slides that are just for you, and you can download the presentation with your notes at the end. And you can also ask questions when you have them. So you can type a question, and at the end, I will see the questions. So you don't have to remember or keep the question in your head all the time. And also, I will use this to ask you a few questions. I will use some polls in there. So if you can go with your phone, with your laptop, or whatever. Let's see how it goes first time. So, all right. So, yeah, this is the future of RESTful. If you were not looking for this presentation, stay, because it's gonna be cool, and we're gonna talk fun things. And I wanna say thanks to Lullabot, the company I work for. It's a web agency, a digital agency. We do things like design, content strategy, web development. We do Drupal, but not only Drupal. We work with JavaScript front-end frameworks, with Node.js, etc. So yeah, they made possible for me to be here. So we need to thank them. So one of the things that I ask myself always when I see a presentation on REST is, what is the degree of holiness that this presenter has about REST? REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and is a concept that Roy Fieldings introduced in his dissertation for his PhD. And it's just a way to interact with web services in a particular structured way. So it defines a lot of concepts and a lot of things that you need to do in order to call your web service REST. For me, it's going to be very academic. I like most of the principles that are defined there, but a couple of those I like to be relaxed about them. So the degree of holiness of this talk is going to be kind of high, but also a little bit relaxed. But yeah, also warning, 60% of sites will not need most of this, of what you will hear today. That means that maybe your site only needs a part of what is here. Maybe your site needs nothing, and that's perfectly fine and normal. But something that you also need to know is that 80% of the traffic will need this, because we're going to talk about how we can make our REST resources be efficient and performant. And big sites are going to need this, because otherwise they will go down. And it's very easy with a REST architecture. It's very easy to make it so you bring your site down with performance issues. So what can you expect about this talk? Is going to be a list of problems. I'm going to try to make it sound very bad. I'm going to give you all the problems first, no answers, and then we're going to go back and see the solutions. And you will see that there are many problems that are very common, that are not only for Drupal, they are for every REST architecture, and they are solved. I mean, there are known solutions to the problems that I'm going to present today, and the only question is, how do we get there with in Drupal 8? Well, the answer for that is easy. We're going to need contrib to do it. So that's it. We don't need to talk about that anymore. When you leave the room, this is what I think you should know. I think that you should know that there are missing pieces for the REST implementation in Drupal 8. There are things that just couldn't get there. Some things could not be implemented. Some other things were maybe only for big sites, and that's not the philosophy of Drupal, to support big sites out of the box or to add this complexity out of the box. For whatever reason, some things were not implemented, and this is a problem. There are known solutions for that, and contrib is going to fill the gap. So this is the minimum that I want you to just, when you leave the room and you think about what the session was about, you should know this. I also hope that you learn how to use an API more efficiently, how to generate an API that can be used more efficiently. And that there are some things, standards and not standards and work in progress, that address this stuff. You don't need to reinvent this at home. I've been reinventing this so many times. And then I Googled, and then I found that there are all these guys. There's JSON API, GraphQL, collection JSON, there's Siren, Uber. There's a lot of standards that just do the stuff, and you don't have to argue about how to call things, etc. So we will see that. And I don't want you to learn about these technologies. I want you to know that they exist, because that's what saved my last project. So let's get started. I know that everyone here is a unique snowflake. You're like unicorns. Everyone is different. And in purpose, I put this session to be for front-end and back-end, because I hope that since this is about APIs, and this is the interface between the front-end and the back-end, you can look at every slide from your perspective and keep whatever applies to you. So when I talk about using sparse field sets, we will get to that later, you will need, if you are a front-end, you will need to think about it in terms of what problem is going to solve for me. And if you're a back-end guy, how do I implement these features so they can use it? So, and this is the first thing. If you go to your phones and you can please answer this quick question, what's your role? I don't know if you're following that. You need to click send. It's not just... You done? Yes?
What's the address?
Oh, okay. Actually, you will be able to catch up the next one. I will put up the address. All right. Oh, that's interesting. I keep changing. That's awesome. Well, it seems that it's almost 50-50 with full stack, back-end, front-end. So there's everything. Let's say that there's everything. All right. For the ones that didn't get the address, it's this thing here. It's going to be in the rest of the slides. I'll keep it up, so you can respond. So yeah, that was my guess, that there will be everything in the room. So hopefully you can take something out of the slides for everything. So Drupal 8 comes with REST in core. I'm pretty sure you know that, and it's awesome. I mean, the implementation is really cool. It's very flexible, but it's kind of hard to interact with. And also it's very extensible, which is kind of required if we want to build all these features on top of. As I said, even if the implementation is so awesome, there are some missing pieces that we will need to implement. So for instance, things that I like about the implementation of REST in Drupal 8 is that it provides you a way to have very flexible output, to have to expose what you need when you need. You have support for content entities out of the box. You just set some configuration and your nodes are exposed and you can interact with your nodes. You can read them, you can write them, update them, and delete. That's mostly all that you need to do. And that's out of the box. And not only this, but if you define a new entity, it's going to be supported by REST without no work. So that's pretty cool. It has media type negotiation, which means that when you're making a request, every different consumer of your API can say, I want this response to be in JSON, or I want this response to be in HAL JSON or XML or whatever, and it's negotiated in the backend. It provides a different output of the same content in different formats. That's also very cool. And also, since this is Drupal, it has all the things Drupal provides, like access control for the entities, like the authentication API that allows you to say who you are when you're making your request, etc., etc. So that's some of the things that Drupal 8 provides out of the box. So let's see let's take a look at the. Yeah, I did that on purpose. Sorry, it's bigger here. So let's take a look at a response of a node. When you request a node in Drupal 8, in REST, you get something like this. You get an NID property with that's an array of an object of an array of one position with an object that says value, and then with the value right there. So it's kind of confusing how this output is put there. But okay, we can work with that, right? If you want to get the NID, you have to get this JSON.NID 0 value, and you get the value number 1. So this is what you get out of the box. This is kind of, a very one-to-one representation of what is in the database. But sometimes you need to do some API design, and that's our first problem. So you want to, this guy keeps coming up. You want to be able to specify the format that you want, because it's more readable. It's easier to know that the NID of the node is 1 if you have NID : 1, and that's it. You also want to decide what to expose, because sometimes you don't want to expose everything. Sometimes you want to expose more. You want to have computed fields, something that gets computed and gets output in the response. So computed fields and pre-processed fields. I don't know if you noticed, but here the created and changed are units timestamps, and you don't want the seconds from 1970. You want full dates. So you want to do some pre-processing. And this is very important if you think about a European Union project, which is millions for your firm. And some other agency designed an API. They said, when you get this piece of content, you're going to have this JSON response. So you come in and you say, I'm going to use Drupal, and all of a sudden you cannot use Drupal because you cannot implement that API that they designed, unless they designed an API that looks like this, which is kind of improbable. So you want to be able to create the design that you want. And also, if you follow some standards in the output of your data, you're going to be able to use in the front ends, you're going to be able to use some existing tools that give you part of the job done out of the box. So yeah, we want to shape our JSON response to be more like this instead, right? We have the NAD = 1, we have the created and updated dates in a readable format, or maybe something like this. This is a thing called collection JSON. It's the same data, it's a different representation. If you use collection JSON, there are some plugins in the front end that know how to build forms for you that get you some work for free. So the idea is that you want to be able to do exactly what you need in the data format. All right, so the second problem in here, you can see that there are relationships for images and tags. Relationships are kind of how different resources talk to each other, because we structure content in a relational way. We want to have the content entity for the user that you then can reuse in different nodes, for example. So you need to have relationships, and relationships are just a jump away from your node. So your author, the author of node 12, is just one HTTP request away from your node, and you keep the target ID in there, and you make an extra request. As you can imagine, doing many extra requests is going to be very expensive, because your website is going to be complex, and probably more complex than this example here. So imagine that there's a blog. My friend Paco started a blog, and he's going to talk about cats, vegan stuff, and I don't know, things. And he wanted to put a design there that has the title of the article, and then a picture of the author, the name, the date that it was displayed. You can see that I set the title of the article, the image of the author. So I'm talking about different entities here, and the author is the author of the article. So there are relationships, and this is not very uncommon. I mean, your website is going to be more complex than this, right? So let's take a look on how many HTTP requests we need to make to build this. So you get articles 12, and in there you get the two tags. One was vegan front end and then kittens, and from there, because you need the name, right? You in the article you only get this 34 and this 88, and in order to get the name of the tag, you need to request the tag itself. So then there's the users. The user has an image entity, and the image entity contains the image file. And then there's the comments. The comments have authors. The authors have images. The images have image files. And every time that we do one relationship, we do one jump, it's an HTTP request that you need to do to request that entity. So that's a big problem. And in fact, it's probably the biggest one, because that makes your performance be really poor. All right, I'm going to depress you further. More problems. Versioning. And this is... I was actually surprised to see that there is no kind of versioning in REST Drupal 8, because you absolutely need it. Unless you are a masochist deployer, you need versioning. Because how do you deploy decoupled architecture, an API with an iOS app that need to be synchronized at the same time? You can't. It's probably Apple who decides when your app goes up, right? So how do you do this? Well, you basically do versioning. You say, my version 1.7 contains this data, and now I want to make some changes, and it's going to be on 1.8. The new thing is going to be in 1.8. Another thing that make very important to have versioning is that if you don't have versioning, you only have one consumer. Even if you have an API that can be used by a website, a web app, an iOS app, an Android app, and whatever, you can only have one with good support. Why? Because imagine that you release your API to the wild, and there's some guy that decides to write a very good Android app, and you're very happy because you didn't have to write the Android app. And then you do the official iOS app, right? So everything is good now. There's one API and 2 clients, but now you need to make changes to the API because you want to introduce new features for your iOS app, right? But if you introduce changes to the API, you're going to break the Android app. So what do? Do you introduce the new features? Or do you keep both apps in the wild? So if you have versioning, you have one running 1.7 and one running 1.8. More things. Discovering content. Here, until now, you have made the assumption that we know the ID of the node that we want to request. We said that we request article 12. But you don't want to memorize those IDs, right? That's stupid. You want to be able to list and find content. And not only listing, because listing is kind of out of the box, but being able to do things of give me all the seasons associated to show 23, or all the users that are younger than 23. And in there, when you say younger, you imply that you have the less than operator. It's not just equal. Or more complicated things like list me all the bands that have a member that lives in Mallorca. So you want to retrieve bands that are filtered by a property that lives inside of a relationship. You want to be able to do that because that's what we do. That's our job, right? We build complex sites with complex interactions. And to be honest, if you can list all the bands with members in Mallorca, you shouldn't be doing this job. So yeah, basically, we are going to need some way to express all these filters, all these relationships. Please don't try to read everything, because it's too much. But just keep here the idea of give me or filter all the users by the author age being 35. And the operator is less than. So it gives you all the articles where the user is younger than 25, right? Or give me all the products that were designed in the 80s, things like that. So we need to be able to find and list content, right? Drupal 8 comes with views, and there's an integration between REST and views, but you cannot do most of these things with views, because views is, I mean, the word says it. It's a view. It's a presentation. And a presentation is something that is for one of the devices. And you want your API to be reused in every consumer. So views is kind of, the good idea to get there. And it's enough if you just have one, maybe, or you have a simple use case. But it's not going to be the golden hammer that we are looking for. I couldn't avoid this. I already gave the solution for this. We're going to need a query language for the URL to be able to do all this filtering. And when I say filtering, I include sorting and pagination, right? You want to be able to say, give me only 50 results, or give me the second page of 50 results. So, yeah, next problem. When you have a payload that is 2 megabytes, then you have a problem, right? When your JSON response is bigger than a picture that you take with your camera, you have a problem. You don't want your responses to be so big if you don't need them. The problem is that we dump everything. We take a gigantic entity because we have been adding fields like crazy, like there's no tomorrow. Let's add more fields to this. And then you realize that when you're requesting it in the API, everything's there. And it's very big. So what do? You have to transport that from the server to the client, and that takes time. And the bigger it is, the more time that it takes. And also, remember that if you are using this in a phone, phones can be kind of old and can be with less resources than a laptop, and parsing a bit document when you only need the title, but you are exposing everything, that's a lot of CPU usage, that's your cell phone having less battery when they are using your site, and people don't want to use your site because it's bad for their battery. And everyone wants to be able to go to bed and say, okay, 1%, and plug in. Another problem is discoverability, and that is that, and this is a minor problem, but I just hate writing documentation. I don't know if you're like me, but writing documentation is not that bad, but maintaining documentation when you made changes maybe 2 months after you wrote the initial thing, that's horrible. So what you want is some kind of way to generate those documents automatically. So your API is going to be explained automatically by interacting with it. So you're going to do something that's going to introspect the API, and it's going to give you an ID is an integer field, and this integer field is required, and that's the documentation that you want, right? So that's it. That's all the problems. So did you have something that you have been struggling with it, that you've seen, this is a really big problem? Oh yes, those 2 megabytes. Or, I don't know, maybe I don't know how to do this API design thing. I struggled with getting the exact output that I want. This is me being curious. Oh, wow. Huh. Yeah, the relationships. Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of expected. Okay, changing. I like that. So I lied. There are more problems. But I won't touch in this problem because I promised you that there are known solutions and standard solutions to the problems that I was presenting. And these other problems are very interesting. Image styles. What do? You're sending the image file to the client. Do you send the original one, the one that is HD, and then the poor phone that can only display this much has to stretch the image to fit the screen? So how do you solve it with image styles? Data aggregation. Well, there are lots of problems that come with that, but these are not the common problems. These are the ones that you face later. So now the solutions. The solution is easy. I mean, you do whatever the front end says. So that 29% is screwed, because you need to follow whatever the front end needs, because otherwise you are coding for one specific front end. So basically you need to have a system that can take the request of, I want this content and I want it this way, and you need to provide a solution for that. So for the API design, what we're going to use is, we're going to use the Drupal 8 guts, the internal APIs, to just build whatever output we need. That's simple. I mean, it's not done. You need to do some coding, and it takes something that's called normalizers, and it's going to be done by Contrib at some point, and that's not a big deal. If you need it now, you need to know that you need to write custom plugins that have normalizers. That's my alarm. God. Sorry. To solve the round trips, what you need to do for the round trips is also very easy. What you do is you say, hey, I have many relationships. If you want one, don't do the round trip. Don't go and make an extra HTTP request. Tell me, what are the relationships that you're going to need in this article? And the front end is going to say, with that query language that we talked about, it's going to say, I need, from this article, I need the relationship to the author, from the author to the image. I need the relationship from the article to the tag. I need the relationship from the article to the comments, from the comments to the author of the comments, and from the author of the comments to the images. And that list goes to the server, and the server, what it does is it takes all the pieces of content and it embeds the content inside of the payload of the article. And it's bigger payload, but it's only one request. So that makes it more performant than making a lot of small requests. But it makes the bloat that we talked about, this big thing, we put everything, worse, right? Because we put everything of many resources in the response. So we're gonna need to solve that as well. But first, we're gonna talk about versioning. You can version REST resources with either the URL or accept headers. If you version them with the URL, it's pretty handy because you can just put a link in, I don't know, in GitHub, in Jira, or whatever ticketing system you use, and then the project manager can click that. If you put it in an accept header, then they need to mess with the header. That's more complicated. Having this versioning string in the URL is not very pure REST, because you need to have a canonical identifier for a resource, and here the same resource is identified differently, but whatever, right? It's very useful. So basically, with versioning, what you will have is that article 12 in version 1.7 and in 1.8 are potentially different. So now, when you're going to do the deploy, what you're going to do is you're going to deploy the version 1.7 of the API. And at that point, you have both the Android app and the iOS app working with 1.6. And remember, the iOS app is the one that you control, and the Android app is the one that you know nothing about. So you release the new version, and both are using 1.6 still, and then iOS goes and makes the update, goes to the App Store, etc., and it starts using the new version. So you have two versions, and every consumer is using the version that they need. In order to do that in Drupal 8, we're going to have to be playing with routes, and again, a contrib is going to do this at some point, and probably having this in the URL is the easiest way. But this is not in core. You will need this, because you're not masochists, I know. Listing and finding. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the entity query or the old entity field query in Drupal 7, but it's a way to construct queries. Basically, you build the object and you keep adding conditions. For this field, I want this condition. For this other field, I want this condition. So that's very, very similar to what we were talking about, right? And Drupal 8 comes with something that is super cool that I tried to implement for Drupal 7, and it's kind of very tricky. Which is the nested relationships filters. So you can do that thing that says, give me all the bands with that have members that live in Mallorca, to put a condition in the entity in the relationship. So that's very easy. So basically, using this system, you can translate from that query language in the URL to a query to the database in Drupal, and then instead of responding with one JSON for a single entity, you respond with an array of JSONs for different entities, different single entities. So yeah, and again, this is the front end asking, I want to filter this, and the Android app filters different than the iOS app because they have different pages and different needs and different targets, different everything. So When you make the request, you do the filters, and that's it. And the server interprets that filter, does the query in the database, and responds back. And responds with what they need. So if from an article, you only need, this keeps coming up. If from an article, you only need the title and the body, and then from the author of the article, you need the name, and then from the tags, you need the label. You specify just the things that you want the backend to return. That means that even if you have that gigantic entity, you just select the ones that you want back. And that makes a response that's unique for your request. And Android, again, Android is requesting some fields, and iOS is requesting some other fields, but the backend implementation is exactly the same, which is what you want. You want to maintain one single API for every consumer. So by doing this fields thing, hey, from this article, give me all these fields. And you're specifying also the fields inside of the relationships, because we are now embedding the relationships inside of the response. So you say, from the author, give me only the name, etc., etc. And you can go down to the nested relationships as deep as you want. For the discovery, Drupal has a lot of introspection tools. When you configure a field, you specify which kind of field, right? You say that it's a text field or an integer field. You say that it's a reference field, or even you give descriptions, you give names to the fields, so you can get all that information and say, whenever someone is requesting an article, but instead of with the get HTTP method, they use the options method, don't return the result of that article, but go to every field, gather all this information, it's a text field with this title and this description, put it back in the response, and they will know that for that article, this field means this, and it's an integer, and they can have all the information that they want without you having to write any of the documentation. And again, in Drupal 8, we have a lot of information for content entities with fields, for configuration entities with YAML files, and at the bottom of everything, there's typed data, which can be used, and it's being used in rules in the rules module. For introspecting the types of data to create forms dynamically. So you can use that for your API. And that gets me very excited, probably a little bit too much. And yeah, that's a lot of work, right? Well, that's true. It's a lot of work. Hopefully, and this is my spam slide. Hopefully, Contrib will catch up. Everything that you heard here today, you can do it in Drupal 7 with the RESTful module in the version 2.x. But who cares about Drupal 7, right? You want to do it in Drupal 8. Well, it's not done yet, and it's probably gonna take a while. But this is gonna be solve problems at some point, and what you need to care about is that the problems are there and how you're gonna use this to solve these problems, to make your APIs be awesome. So all this query language seems like, but why is he using fields equal and not something else? Well, there are several standards that are competing right now, and one of them I like it a lot is JSON API, and it's just a specification. It tells you how a front end will ask things and how the backend will respond to those things. It doesn't give you any code, right? But it just gets the discussion of, okay, how are we going to create this query language that we were saying on the URL. So JSON API just does it for you. You can use it, and you end the discussion right there, and you can go, I don't know, play Mineseeker or whatever. So it has sparse field sets. Sparse field sets are that thing where you request the fields that you want. I only want the title and the author name. It has includes. Includes is for relationships. The relationships that we said that we are embedding. So it has an opinion. It tells you how you should ask for something to be included for a relationship. And it's very easy to read. It solves circular dependencies of entities that, you know, one entity point to another and this other to another, and then it goes in a circle, and you don't want to end up embedding recursively, right? So it solves that. And has a format for errors. I like that it's very extensible, so you can write extensions, and it has a way, so it thinks about how to write extensions. And you say, JSON API, you don't support this thing that I need. Well, there's a way that you can say, you just provide the documentation for how to interact with this to expand JSON API, and then you can integrate with that through these extensions. And it's the only one that is stable right now. The others are kind of in beta and are still kind of in flux, but this one is going to remain like this for a long time. So that's good. And things that I don't like is that it doesn't have an opinion about how to do versioning and discovery. So that is one discussion that you need to have if you use JSON API. But it gets most of the work out of the way. So that's what a JSON API response looks like. As you can see, there's a data array, and every item of the data, it has a type, an ID, attributes, and relationships. Type and ID, it's the type is the resource type, the resource name. The ID is the ID. And then the attributes are the fields, and the relationships are our entity relationship fields, right? So this is how you connect. And then in here, you can see that it says include the author. So in the included section, there's these embeds that we were talking about. So yeah, basically you can trim down the fields for the articles to the title, the body, and the author. The title, body, and author. And well, that's one way to do it. I like this one a lot. Another way to do it, even if it's not REST, and you will probably hear about this, is GraphQL. If you see here what GraphQL is doing, you can do it with JSON API and vice versa. So you can see that it's requesting a user. It's requesting this user, and it says only give me these fields and embed this relationship, and for this relationship only give me these fields. So it's the same principle, because these are the same problems. Everyone has these problems. So there are different solutions to apply this. This is not REST, and I don't know if you noticed, but this looks like JSON, but it's not JSON. You know, these parentheses here, it's kind of funny. It's, you know, GraphQL is something else. It's not REST. That doesn't mean that it's not better or it's not worse, but it solves the same problem, and that's what we care about, solving the problem. So this is the response: the user with the ID that we wanted, and then the embedded entity in here. And there are many more. As I said, there's Siren, Collection.json, Uber, HAL. Drupal 8 comes with HAL out of the box. But the implementation of HAL that gives us is kind of limited. I mean, it doesn't have the features that I talked about today. But it comes with the output format of it, if that makes sense. Kind of a down version of it. And yeah, there are lots, and there's also Falcor with this kind of the GraphQL alternative. GraphQL is from Facebook, Falcor is from Netflix. You have a lot to choose. And this is how you express I didn't like anything of this, vote for the session, and that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go for the questions now.
So what? You hear me? Yeah. I don't know what to do
Pretty
because
nice,
Mateu,
thank you.
Mateu, you said that you have questions already in your app.
Yeah,
So
I
does that
think
make
so.
me useless then? Shall I see?
It's. I should be able to see them. Maybe here. All right. I should have seen this. Yeah. Well, I can dance, just not on video.
Can you read the questions out loud for the recording?
Yeah, so it's what about caching systems in these REST systems on Drupal 8? Can you raise your hand, whoever wrote this? Moi? So this is very cached. I mean, I don't know if you heard about render cache in Drupal 8, but everything that gets rendered, even if it goes through even if it doesn't go through all the HTML pipe, because it gets in a controller and it responds with JSON, it gets cached. So when you build the entity, you get the entity cache, and then with the render, you also get the cache. So it gets pretty thoroughly cached. And also, if you use the URL to do the querying, you can query all this in Varnish or in Akamai, and that's pretty flexible. So what is Drupal? I wanted to say something clever about that, but I guess that Drupal is what pays bills, right? Oh, you're so great. I'm not doing questions like this for the next presentation. Yeah, okay, so who asked this question? Great, let me see if I get this question correctly. So your question is, if when you have these relationships, you can use this big JSON with embedded parts, instead of to get information from it, to craft this JSON yourself, to send it to the server, to create the article with the tags, with the images, etc. Is that your question? So ideally, yes, that's not implemented, but that's part of this whole plan, right? Of this whole future of REST in Drupal 8. Different standards have different opinions on this. So right now, and I may be mistaken, don't quote me on that, in Drupal 8 REST, if you want to create entities, you are forced to use the HAL format. And if someone else knows this for sure, you're not used.
Using JSON to make entities.
Oh, you need to use JSON and cannot use HAL.
Correct.
Okay, the other way around. So you're kind of limited on that. Obviously, what you need to do is how you get the response back. You need to be able to create those. You can do that in RESTful, as I mentioned before, in Drupal 7. So it can be implemented, because I did it for Drupal 7, and it can be do it for Drupal 8. Drupal 8 comes, and this may be an implementation detail, comes with the serialization API, which is what you use when you specify the resource, how you make an entity out of a payload that you send, whatever you send in the body, in the post. Did that respond to your question? Do you keep adding this? All right.
Any other questions? Raise your hand and I'll give you a mic. That it? Okay. Oh, okay.
You haven't said anything about authentication, but is there anything new or related with REST with authentication method? Short answer.
So, yeah, Drupal 8 comes with the authentication API, which means that you can authenticate any request, including the REST ones. There are several projects. Juanpi maintains OAuth. I'm kind of less smart, and I maintain simple OAuth. You can basically write an authentication provider very easily with the authentication API. So what it takes is you implement some methods, and you can put whatever you want. Like if you want to only allow requests if they send you a cat picture, you can implement that. That's not very useful, but you can do it. So yeah, basically you can use authenticated traffic with authentication methods that are not the ones that come with core. And core comes with cookie authentication and basic authentication. I think that's it. Those are the only ones that core comes with.
Next questions? Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mateu.